Okay, for number 9, this story problem, they give you an equation, and then it says find the maximum height of the ball to the nearest foot. I highlighted that because anytime there's a maximum, that should automatically scream to you that you are finding the vertex, okay? Because you have to find the maximum height of the vertex to the nearest foot. So with something like this, if you were to do this on your graphing calculator, you would have to make sure that you adjust your window. But you can also find this using algebra, right? So you can do the opposite of B over 2A. So that's exactly what I did. Here's my B value. So the opposite is negative 0.25 over 2 times my A value. And then I got approximately 14.71. I plugged that back into my equation. Negative 0.0085, 14.71 squared. When you guys do that, do you guys plug it all in at one time? What do you do? Or did you use your graphing calculator? Did you use the graph? Can you tell me what you did? Okay, so plugged it in. Plus 6. Okay, so see how you get like the 7.8? Okay, if you're rounding to the nearest foot, that's going to round that up to your whole number 8. Okay, if you do the graph route, just remember you're going to have to adjust your window. So I like to do this anyway, so I know what X value I have to go to, right? So I have to make sure I go past 15 on my window. Okay. All right, question for me about number 9. Okay, so why don't you check 10, 11, 12, and then we'll go over those. So this is the factoring. And then so you do have to do that by factoring. Okay, so the first one, I know that we really wanted to add 144 and take the square root and say plus or minus 12. And that would be fine if it didn't say by factoring. Okay, so if it says by factoring, we do have to use our special pattern, the difference of 2 squares. So x plus 12 times x plus 12, if I check that with FOIL, x squared plus 12 minus 12 will cancel. 12 times negative 12 is negative 144. Now remember, when you are doing this, you have to show me this step, which is x plus 12 equals 0 or x minus 12 equals 0. That's because I need to make sure that you understand the zero product property. The only reason why we can set these equal to 0 is because they multiply to 0. Okay, there's no other case where you could do that. For 11, you're looking for 2 values that multiply to x squared, so you start with x and x. Then they have to multiply to negative 28. Okay, so the first 2 multiply to the first number, the last 2 multiply to the last number, and then we check with FOIL. Questions for me on 10 or 11? How's the factoring go? Yep? Did you not factor it?
I did.
Okay, so these are the only 2 things that would make this equation true. Because did you say you got 11?
No, that's for problem.
Oh. Oh, okay, thank you, sorry. Yeah, so that means that the numbers are in the right place, just the signs, you have to switch them. So if you had negative 7, did you have x plus 7 or x minus 7? Okay, so once you have the factor, you're going to set that x plus 7 equal to 0, and then your next step is going to be to subtract 7 from both sides to get the x by itself. Okay, same thing with this. You would add the 4 over to get the positive 4. If you guys do notice that you have the opposites
here, -7 and +4 would be -3, so you're really close. We just have to switch those signs. Does that help? Yeah. Okay. For 12, notice this one is different. What am I missing in 12 that I had in 11? That I had in number 11?
That,
Yeah. What value?
value for in front of the X.
Well, I have the one in front of the X. I have my A value, I have my B value, I'm missing the C, right? That intercept. Okay, so what you're going to do, if you see you're missing that C value, when you factor, you're taking out your GCF. This is actually what I went over with you earlier this week. Okay, and then if you got it wrong on your other review, I circled it and I made you go back and do it yesterday. Okay, so when you take out the 5x, you're left with x plus 3. You can check it by distributing. 5x times x is 5x squared, 5x times 3 is 15x, and then you have to set each one equal to 0. Please make sure that you showed all of your necessary work for those. Okay? All right, now we are going to look at completing the square. And then I'll go over what questions you guys have on these. So for 13, you have to write out the -7 or 1. They were whole numbers, so don't just leave it as a plus or minus. Actually calculate that part. 14 is -3 plus or minus root 14. There's no perfect square in 14, so you got to keep it. Same thing with square root of 23. No perfect squares in there. Okay, let's pick a couple of those to do together. Which one do you guys want to do?
Maybe 13 and 15.
Okay, great. All right, so for 13, if this tells you you have to complete the square, so when you're completing the square, you want the C term on this side, and then from there, do you guys remember how to fill in this? Half of b squared. So here's my b, half of 6 is 3, 3 squared is 9, so if I add 9 here, I add 9 here. And then from there, you're going to factor. Now sometimes I put that there as my reminder, because this is always half of b. And then that equals 16. Once I get here, to undo the power of 2, I take the square root, and then I want to remember to put the plus or minus when I take the square root. This will be plus or minus 4. So now when I subtract 3, okay, this is x equals -3 plus or minus 4. I have to do those out because they're whole numbers. So -3 plus 4 is how I get the 1. -3 minus 4 is how I get the -7. Okay, so make sure that you do simplify that one with the whole numbers. Okay. All right, and 15 is set up already for me to put my blanks in. So again, I'm going to do half of your b value, so -4 squared, which is 16. And because these are on opposite sides of the equation, what I do to one side, I have to do to the other side. Those are the same. So now I'm going to factor. Make sure you put your correct sign. This sign should match. And then 16 plus 7 is 23. I can take my square root. I want to make sure that I'm taking care of that little stuff, like the plus or minus. And then my last step is going to be to add the 4. And then that will go in front. And then because this is inside the root, this is outside, I can't combine them. There's no perfect squares in 23. It's a prime number. So you're just going to leave it as that root 23. Okay? How did that go? Did it go okay when you have like nothing to simplify? Did you second guess yourself that there's something to simplify sometimes? Yep, sometimes you won't have to do that. Now the vertex form, that's where you're going to do the opposite because everything is on one side of the equation. So again, I will show you your correct answers for that, and then we're going to go over a few of these together. So one thing I do want you to check is to write the function in vertex form. If you're writing it in vertex form, you should have f of x equals, or g of x equals, or h of x equals. You have to have that part of it. Okay, it is a function. And then your vertex for 16 is -9, -4. For 17, you should have 3, 4. 18 is 1, -9. Okay, we'll definitely do 18 together. What about 16 or 17? Yeah.
For the f of x for 17, I put x plus 3 squared.
Yep, it should be minus. So this should always match this symbol. So if this is plus, this will be plus. If this is minus, this will be minus. This is minus, so that one's minus. Yep, and that's a good reminder, right, to do that quick check that the signs match. That happens. 16 or 17, do you guys want to do one of those together? Or just number 18? All right, let's do 18. So 18 is special because the first step, when you're grouping these together, you have to make sure that this is a 1, and if it's not, what do? We got to take out whatever this number is. So it's 3. So when you take it out, you're dividing. So -6 divided by 3 is -2x. Then you can put your blank in, -6, and then you can put your other blank in there. Okay, and then from there, this part is the same. You do half of b, so half of -2 is -1. You square it, you get 1. But now, you don't just put 1 there. Remember, you have to distribute. So this is 3 times 1. So really, what we did is we added 3. See how these two blanks are on the same side? The only way to balance is if they're opposites. So if this is plus 3, this has to be minus 3. So these two guys should be opposites. Okay, and then from there, I can just factor. This is a minus, so this will be a minus. -6 minus 3 is -9. This was h of x. And then your vertex is hk. So you do the opposite of what's inside there, and then your k is on the outside. Okay, other questions for me on those? All right, now, for 19, 20, and 21, it says solve each equation. Okay, when we did this in our notes, I told us, well, we came up with all the ways that we solve equations, right? We can factor, we can use the graph, and remember, I was very dramatic. We graphed it, and then what happens? What happens sometimes when you graph it? You're trying to find the x-intercepts, but what happens? Yes, they're not there. There's no x-intercepts. So to save time, instead of, if it's not telling you to factor, or not telling you to graph, to save time, what should you do? What? I know, but how? There's many ways. Complete the square, right? So if I'm solving each equation and it doesn't tell me how, and I have a trinomial, I'm going to complete the square. Now, for 19, yes, you don't have a trinomial, right? You just have two terms. So this you can just divide by 3, x squared equals -25, take the square root, x equals plus or minus I square root of 25, and then the square root of 25 is 5. There we go. Okay, but for 20 and 21, I have 3 terms. So I'm going to complete the square by adding in my blank spaces. So half of -4 is -2. -2 squared is 4. See how these are on opposite sides of the equal sign? That's how I know what I do here, I have to do here. The only time you do the opposite is if you're trying to put it in vertex form. And then from here, -13 plus 4 is -11. Take the square root. So you have plus or minus I root 11. And then your last step will be to add 2 to both sides. So x should be 2 plus or minus I root 11. and then 21's the same. So x squared minus 4x plus blank equals negative 9 plus blank. Half of 4 is negative 2. Negative 2 squared is 4. Do the same thing to both sides. X minus 2 squared equals negative 5. Square root, square root. So this will be I root 5. I can't simplify that any further. So x equals 2 plus or minus I root 5. Okay, so questions for me on 20 or 21? Yes, Maya?
For 20, I got 2 plus minus
It's because you did square root of
2. Yeah, the square root of negative 13 plus 2.
Oh, thank you, thank you. Yes. Okay, yeah, so you should have negative 9, not 11. And yes, when you take the square root of 9, I was excited because I saw so many hands up. I was like, yes, you have questions. But when you take the square root of 9, yes, you will get 2 plus or minus 3i. And then we would do the last one together. Yes. So here's the correct x minus 2. Take the square root, plus or minus 3i, add your 2 over. And this one we did well? Yes, Ava?
So whenever you have like 3i, and you have 2, can you simplify that to be like 5i?
Nope, because one has an I and one doesn't. So it would just be like if it had an X, we wouldn't combine those together.
Okay.
Yep. So you can only combine it if it has the same term. Unless you were multiplying, which is going to happen below. So for these, you're expressing each number in terms of I. So right away, you can take out the negative and replace it with I. Now, 288 is a big number, so maybe some of you thought, oh, I'm going to do the factor tree, right? You do that, cut it in half. And then look, notice this. What's 144? Yeah, it's a perfect square, right? So the square root would be 12. So this would be 12 square root of 2. So your final answer is 12i root 2. Okay, and then for 23, you have negative 36, so this is 3i root 36, so 3i times 6. You can multiply those two together, you will get 18i. Now remember, for these you don't have to put the plus or minus in. Do you guys remember why? You only put the plus or minus in when you do what? Yeah, when you're solving for x. So when you take the square root yourself. And then for this one, you have negative 2 I root 45, but you have to find the perfect squares, okay? So 9 goes into 45. So this is negative 2i times 3 times root 5. So you can do negative 2 times 3. So negative 6i root 5 is your final answer. How did 24 go? Good? Okay. And then the last one, this one was a trick one because you won't put I in it. Why not?
The square root is
Yeah, the square root's not negative. So if the square root's not negative, don't put an I in it. So your quiz is going to have a mixture of answers that have I in it, and then some are not going to. So just make sure that you're being mindful that the I only comes out if there's a negative underneath the square root. Okay? Now, negative 1/3 times 3 is what? Yep, so negative 1 is just going to be negative root 7. Okay, so you do not need an I for that one. Okay, and as you're going along with this, make sure like you're circling, writing down your correct answers in pen. That way you can see, oh, if this is what I'm having trouble with, maybe I didn't do all the homework for that section. So tonight to study, I might pick out some of those practice problems.